All right, today on Cleveland Tech History, we're speaking with Kevin J. Goodman of BlueBridge Networks. And Kevin, first I have to congratulate you on the 2 new editions of Family Grandpa. Tell us about the girls.
Yeah, it's great. 2 babies, 2 baby girl twins, born August 14th. And, I was thinking maybe in my mind that this would come later, but it came now. So be it. It's terrific. We've rallied and rose to the occasion of enjoying it. A lot of joy. My son Daniel and his girlfriend Leonie had 2 beautiful girls, Kayomi and Kalani.
And we've known each other a long time, and I know how important family is to you and community. And you can see even in your office here, there's pictures all over of family. And these are the 2 cutest little girls. I see your Facebook posts and all. It's just it's amazing. They're so tiny. The twins just adds a dimension to it and all. But before we get into some of your and BlueBridge's community outreach, let's get into your personal history a little. And one of the things I like to ask, this is Cleveland Tech history. People have been around for a while. If they remember their first email platform, their online platform, was it CompuServe? Was it AOL? Was it Freenet? Was it Prodigy? The Source? Do you remember?
I do. I had to think a bit. First, I was going to say Exchange hosted here.
Okay.
But prior to that, it was ExchangeNet.
Okay.
And
en.com.
Yeah. Yes. It was on Euclid Avenue, I think, out of the Leader building in the early days. And I had that for a number of years, even while I was here, when they sold, I believe, to Quircom.
Yeah. One of these days, we're gonna take a look at some of those early providers, the Keith building, and
Yeah, excuse me, it was the Keith building, not the Leader.
APK and ExchangeNet, and of course Cleveland Freenet and all that stuff. That's fun. So anyway, when you were a kid, were you interested in tech? Were you a tech kind of guy?
It's funny, absolutely not. My interests were more in the creative side of the world, or in law. Maybe I'll be a lawyer, attorney. Maybe I'll be this or that. And I was a Boy Scout. In Boy Scouts, we did have some introduction and some of the merit badges to tech, but very little, but some. And so my interests really weren't technical. I couldn't fix gadgets. I wasn't handy. I wasn't mechanical per se. So my interest in tech really started when I came here. And it's important to say that when I came here to work really business development initially. And I would bring my skills and talents in business development to help what was the infancy of BlueBridge. I was in the construction business, and it had little or nothing to do with what I studied in college, which was political science with a specialization in political communication. So that didn't really lend itself to technology either, and spent some time at Marshall Law School and looking at an MPA in the College of Urban Studies at Cleveland State. So, long story short, my brother and I started a business, landscaping business, which morphed into, when he left and went on his way in a career, for me, high-end residential construction towards the end. And, in my late 30s, with a family, I had 2 boys, a mortgage, and I, had cancer. And so those 2 years of that battle, or that, journey of getting well, took everything from me but my family and my life. And so I had to begin again and start over. So, it's not an easy story to tell, but the truth is that I needed money, and I came to my brother, who's here, and said, hey, I need a loan. I got to pay the bank. I'm in trouble. And he said, I won't give you money, but I'll give you a job. And that job and that check, the first 4 weeks took care of what was needed to move forward. And so I say all that in context to say this. When I got here, I didn't know what a Word file was, let alone how to save it.
Right? Wow.
So that's the context, and it's a long answer to your question, but it's really, today, I'm certified in multiple vendor solutions. I understand the technologies in depth, in a deep dive. I understand how my IT solutions directly affect and serve my customers' business and IT objectives. Started out in things I could grasp early, which you might think, make sense, like risk management, disaster recovery, business continuity. These are theories and practices, policies, procedures, which weren't technical per se. They had technical solutions,
Right.
but they have everything to do with disaster recovery and business continuity in terms of high availability, reliability, and security that the data center brings. That's where I got my footing.
Okay, yeah, that's a poli-sci degree is a long way to. I've seen you speak a lot, both live and in webinars, and you're an expert in cloud computing and managed services, cyber security, all that stuff now. So it's a long way from poli-sci, but I guess it kind of fits in to make the person of Kevin Goodman.
Well, it's been a cool journey. I was thinking this morning before you came about DOS and how important it was for me to learn DOS in my first year here. You'd say that's not really relevant. It's behind almost everything. And all the technologies that I've learned in 17 years and become certified in, or additional extended curriculums, they all still exist and play a part, which is very strange. You have Moore's Law, which is essentially exponential growth. And it's like going from this end of the gymnasium to that end of the gymnasium, and it takes you 78 steps. But 17 years later, it's 3 steps to get to the same point. And that's really a general way of simplifying Moore's Law. But the interesting thing is, all those technologies sort of layer on one another. They still exist in some form or another. So they all remain relevant as much as things change. And how technology is delivered and the speeds of it and the efficiencies of it, of course, changes and exponentially gets better. And we have to remain relevant and up to date and be even ahead of what's coming next.
Yeah, I want to get more into the BlueBridge story, but I have to go back a second. We're both fans of Cleveland's diversity, the immigrant stories that built America and Cleveland in particular. And what's your family's relationship with that?
That's a great question, and it's one I really enjoy. It's one of the great things about being a Clevelander, is the dynamics and the diversity and the number of languages that are spoken on any given day here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Toronto is the #1 city in the world with the most languages spoken in a day. And Chicago and then New York City are very close. But Cleveland's up there. And it's magical, to hear and see the stories, the neighborhoods, and how they evolved and when those ethnicities and nationalities came. My people came in about the 1860s on my mother's side. They were Russian Jewish people. They immigrated because, like most people, where they were wasn't going well. And they came here to avoid certain persecutions. And my great-great-grandfather is buried in Lansing Cemetery, and my great-great-uncle and his family. And they have the largest tombstones in the cemetery. They're easy to find. And they weren't wealthy men. They were actually poor, but they were here first. So everybody who came after lived in their floors, as I'm told. And, they matriculated one by one. So that was my mother's story. And then my father, who's 87 and still alive, came from Liverpool, England. Irish blood, born in the port town of Liverpool, when it was in its rough days as a port and manufacturing steel city. And he was bombed out by the Germans when he was 13. And so at 13, he joined the Merchant Navy.
Wow. And
sailed the seas until he came here and met my mother after he was living in Toronto and was based in Toronto on the Merchant Navy and was at that time in the Great Lakes, before that all over the world, and met my mother here in port. So he became, in time, an American citizen. So my story of immigration is first generation and third generation. And like most people, like I said, we came here because where we were wasn't going well. And we had the ability, which is why I'm so focused and conscious on being very open to immigration and second chances, new opportunities, yes, but also how much it affects an economy, and diversity brings new insights and new practices and new ways of thinking, and challenges a lot of ways how things go day to day. But they make, in many cities, if you look to Columbus, and there's a lot of immigration that you'd be surprised today, and the growth in technology and entrepreneurship that the immigrant community brings, and here in Cleveland as well. So I'm fascinated by, of course, in technology, most of the great big tech companies are run by or founded by immigrants. And many of the customers I serve here at BlueBridge are immigrants, first generation American citizens. And there's something magical about the work ethic, the willingness to achieve and work hard and get ahead. And I think it reminds all of us, to do the same. It challenges all of us to keep up with that enthusiasm. There's a certain beauty in that, and the hard work that comes with immigration and people integrating themselves into the American way of life is inspiring, and it continues to inspire me. And I know all the research and all the statistics vet out that legal immigration in cities where it's impacted in large numbers are the most economically sound and growing, innovative cities in the country.
And even the risk taking that immigrants do, that translates to business as well. A 13-year-old kid getting on a boat and leaving the familiarity of home, or a woman coming here with a couple of kids in tow and taking their chances on America. That's just there's lessons for us all there.
It's funny you say that. It's true in my family, on my father's side, as you just mentioned, but also my mother's side. I mean, my great-great-grandfather, he was blind, and he was a blacksmith in Russia.
Wow.
And he was blinded by his work. And here he led his family to America as a blind man across the sea, in a tragic twist of where he was coming from. As a poor man, took the risk and made it here and led the way for a lot of Russian Jews that came to his neighborhood in the 1860s.
Okay, well let's talk about BlueBridge a little. It's so easy to find your headquarters. There's the huge sign on the building here. You're right in the heart of Playhouse Square in Cleveland. I think the first time I was here was for your 10-year anniversary party in 2015, and that was a blast. And I remember Brad Nellis was president of NEOSA then, and Jack Schron of Jurgen spoke, and a bunch of people like that. Tell us about this facility here, and how you got to 10 years.
Well,
at that time.
That night too was Kevin Schmatzer from the city.
That's right.
I think that was a celebration on the second floor. We're on the fifth floor in this building is our flagship facility, and so we celebrated the 10-year in an open, newly built data center, and empty at the time. And that night, what I recall is a lot of diversity in industry, in nationalities, religious faiths, really a great makeup of the tech community. And BlueBridge at that time received proclamations from basically every major government official in the state and the city. So it's great recognition. We have grown up with many tech companies in Cleveland, some that I'm allowed to name and some that I'm not, for obvious reasons. But Packy Highland, God bless his soul, and AJ Highland, they came here when we were essentially brand new. They took a risk on us. They were building their business, and they brought a few servers, and today they're here with a big platform amongst many other places in the world. But we had the ability to meet people like that. Or Philip Alexander, when he started in Brand Muscle in its infancy, and they were here well over a decade. And many companies I wish I could name because they're great stories. And but some of those figures, the diversity in the figures, Philip Alexander,
Sure.
Indian, Packy and his family, the Irish, and great stories of tech companies making it in Cleveland. And there's a great ability for me and for you to recognize the list of companies that have succeeded and come out of Cleveland and dispel the myth. who's going to be the next unicorn, the next Cover My Meds, or Exploris, or the list goes on and on, or Embrace Pet, pet insurance.
Yeah.
You think about that, and it was founded here.
You think of someone like Steve Potash, who just focused in the 80s before there was an MP3 format or anything, just audio books were his whole thing. They stuck with it and created Overdrive, and it's huge. I mean, he's in every library in the world and all that. And it all just good people here working hard. I've got to ask, how'd you get the name BlueBridge? What does that mean?
So it's interesting. The name is based on, my brother was on the river, and he was talking to someone on the phone, and the question was asked, well, what are we going to name it? He looked up and he said, BlueBridge. And, it's a landmark bridge in Cleveland. Certainly a beautiful bridge, lit up at night. And his concept was, spanning the technology divide, business and technology. And in reality, that bridge is east side, west side.
Right.
And how do you bring that divide together? So how do we bring technology to businesses and institutions, nonprofits, etc. in the world, and help them meet their mission, drive revenue, protect and cure their patients by what we do? And so technology's spanning that divide in industry and business, and helping move things along economically in a web and data-centric world.
Well, that's a great story. I never knew that. And if you're not a Clevelander and you haven't seen all the different bridges down there, I mean, there's lift bridges and swing bridges, and it's really something to see. It's worth a trip just to see that. But let's get back to BlueBridge here. You started primarily as a data center, and who's your typical customer? Is it enterprise, is it SMB, or any specific verticals that you cater to or provide for?
So that question is easy to answer because our customer base essentially mirrors the economic framework of the city. Manufacturing, legal, and professional services, accounting services. A lot of great professional firms like law firms here that serve companies, institutions all over the country, in fact, some global. E-commerce, software, as you mentioned, Overdrive or Highland. There are many companies that also serve, like us, health services. The growth in health services from the day I was here until today, there's been growth every quarter.
Wow.
And we're known internationally. It's a great place, as they say, to be sick in order to help to get well.
Yeah.
We're blessed to have good research, good doctors, practitioners, institutions. We have 3 big hospitals here, and they're all great, and they all make each other great because they have to compete, obviously, for business locally and nationally. And so we serve many physicians' practices, many labs and research institutions, some that serve internationally, some that have replaced old ways of doing business. One company in specific is DataTrack International, who has essentially replaced the 3-ring binder that the salesperson used to go in periodically and pick up where the product information was going.
Right.
Well, now it's done instantaneously. And if there are issues with that medicine, let's say, they can be highlighted right away instead of more people having to die. So it's an example of technology changing, health services and a software company impacting research in the now. And that's a Cleveland story. And I think Dr. Jeffrey Green founded that. You may remember Jeffrey.
Sure.
And they've been here for a long time and continue to be a great customer. So those industries I name are the bread and butter of Cleveland. We also serve a lot of companies outside of Cleveland, and many of those companies we serve because of companies that we serve in Cleveland. So the ecosystem, just like Detroit had the car business, really,
Right.
But we had ancillary business, and we still do, in terms of you name it that parts, different factories from Ford and GM through the years, where Detroit was the major place. Cleveland was part of that ecosystem. And for us, a lot of our companies here that serve the country or the world, a lot of our introduction to those customers is through them, by serving them. We now have grown, outside of the region and outside of the state.
It used to be that IT and tech was just really another department, something on the org chart, like receivables or something. And it's evolved. I know you have more of a holistic approach now, where it's all integrated with, it used to be the IT, we'd write some code in our little room, and if you kept the network going and people's computers didn't crash and you gave them their reports, you were it didn't matter. But now it's evolved, so with government rules and all these things, it's interspersed throughout the whole company, and I think that's why you went for the holistic approach, kind of one-stop shopping. Count on us, blame us if it's bad. Is that fair to say?
It's fair. It is fair because today the IT world, the IT personnel or department individuals are no less important than the attorney, the accountant, the clergy, to a business, right? In a web and data-centric world, what we do helps companies do their business better, faster, quicker, smarter, increase revenue, or save patients, logistics, help trucking get from here to there, business, trucks move America. So we have our ability to be in everything that happens in business, in healthcare and so forth, law enforcement in the world, because it's all interconnected, obviously, through the web and through data. So as that's proliferated, I think in 2018, the statistic came out that in 2018, more data was created than every single year prior in the history of man.
Wow.
And I'm sure that continues.
Yeah.
I don't know this year's stats or last, but I know if you just think about that for a second, that's a big number,
right,
and a big reality to get your arms around. And it helps demonstrate how impactful and how integrated technology is in everything we do today. I mean, we've gone from a data center to a cloud computing company to a managed service company, licensed hardware software reseller, and we do all of it. It's a hybrid delivery. And every customer has different obvious IT and business objectives, different solutions that help them drive their business or institution or firm. And we have to deliver custom platforms. And it has to be compliant, and like you say, law and public policy is now something you have to be very mindful of. Third-party audits are critical, and they take a lot of work. They take a big expense. They take a big commitment to get better each year by defining and deepening your controls, and then have some other party, a CPA firm, for example, say you're doing it. Check you off the box to bring legitimacy and predictability to the industry. So that definition of Moore's Law also applies here to the proliferation of data and the proliferation of technology, the improved efficiencies, reduced costs, which in the marketplace you have to have best in class, you have to have vision, you have to constantly be upgrading and augmenting your technology just to stay ahead in the business that you actually deliver.
Let's look at how in two areas where things have really evolved and changed that you're covering now. And the first we'll look at is disaster recovery. Now I remember back in the day, way back then, we would preach to our clients and customers, you have to back up, and we had it was usually to a external media, tapes, and we do the grandfather, father, son thing, and if they took one off site, we were so happy. But we never really, we told them you got to try a sample restore and all that, but people really didn't. But that was disaster recovery planning back then? How has that evolved now?
So, that's a really fun question in terms of the evolution of tech and disaster recovery and business continuity, because 17 years ago, you had work group recovery seats. That was a big thing for big companies that could afford it. So if the issue occurred and you declared a disaster, you would go to a sun guard, for example, and you would send employees who had practiced and drilled this routine to get the company up as quickly as possible. And that wasn't like minutes or hours. It wasn't even sometimes days. It was weeks to restore. And today, you can restore in real time or minutes.
Yeah.
And that's magical. I mean, tapes often failed, although they were the medium of the day. But now, it's different. There's so many methodologies of storage now. High I/O, real high-performing SANs, drives have replaced pretty much all of the tape. Some small businesses and others use tape when it's less critical data and it's archival in nature, and it can go away in the very rare case, to be pulled and reused. But they're not really disaster recovery business continuity utilizations anymore. Their methodology or what they play a part in is archival. And even in in the cloud, you can do archival data probably for cheaper than you can maintain tape and tape arrays to keep it going. But the point of that is that's how it looked. See, work group recovery seats, tapes, restore. No matter what size company you were, if you wanted a DR, you did that. Also, some companies, to quote, save money, would buy colocation space, and they wouldn't even populate the servers. They'd have empty racks or cages, and in the event of a disaster, they'd have servers shipped, and then racked and stacked. And again, it's days, weeks, months to restore. And the statistic when I first started, if you were down for 7 days, and imagine that was 17 years ago with technology, if you were down for 7 days, there's a 90% chance that within 1 year you'd be bankrupt.
Wow.
And that was then. So
Wow.
Imagine now,
Yeah.
if you're down, your competitors are up and live and on the net, and they're doing business. And they go to click on your website and you're not there, and they need what you sell or deliver. They're going to your competitor.
Right.
And not to mention brand damage and so forth. So the good news is, from the worst part of what is ransomware and a lot of cybercrime that has come out of the ransomware is the proliferation of attention to replication and backup software, backward hardware, the way it's delivered today over the cloud, and where it's kept and how it's going to bring you and restore you back to business. Now we're talking minutes, or if it's mirrored, live, hot, right away, in the now. And so as the pace of business and the pace of technology keeps up, those backups now are mission critical. When in the old days it was like nice to have.
Yeah.
You check a box. But really, I remember being part of the contingency planners of Ohio. And one of the things I remember from the CPO, for lack of better words, my peers or colleagues in the disaster recovery world who were working in risk management and who were the DRBC people for many companies, and many of them large or Fortune 500, often spoke about being a beggar at the trough, to be budgeted and to be maintained and to be taken seriously. And the common theme was they were taken seriously when the proverbial hit the fan, and they got a little bit of traction, but then they got forgotten about again. But today it's so executable and so affordable and so necessary in the web, because ransomware is a critical issue. And if you don't have the right backups architected to not also be infected, interestingly enough, you're going to have a very difficult time overcoming a ransomware attack. And there are solutions, to overcoming them. There are also obviously training and security awareness and methodologies of technology to avoid it. But, in the mission critical world that we live on the web, the ultimate reality is everybody's going to be hit by somebody, and the degree is going to be greater or less.
And it's it's really evolved here. I remember late 80s, even early 90s, we'd have a virus threat, and some were even not just innocuous but fun, like the cookie virus. I don't know if you remember that, where it pop up on your screen, interrupt you, and say, "Give me a cookie." And the solution was type in Oreo or something, and it would clear it and come back another time. And we had Michelangelo and all isolated viruses that fixes would come out and you could deal with that. But now, with cybersecurity, it's such a either political or criminal enterprise where people spend their entire lives and careers just trying to get into your system and screw you over and make money and destroy your stuff and swindle you. And they're experts at social engineering, so they're talking to your staff and tricking them, and they're experts at it. This is their career. So it's gone a long way from typing in Oreo when the screen says, "Give me a cookie."
Cybercrime is no longer childhood business. This is no longer the boy or young
The script
person
kiddies.
living in his mother's basement,
Right.
causing havoc or creating fun. Today, make no mistake, these are nation states, these are criminal enterprises, these are, and some of these run like a business. They even have their own customer service line to help you through the trauma and get you back on your feet. That's insane. So nefarious, nonetheless. And that's who we're protecting our customers from. And in this tech community, we're very fortunate in Cleveland to have a lot of great competitors. And they like I spoke about the hospitals, the more good competitors you have, the better it makes all of us. And we have to be better and better. There's 999 things that we've learned and done to keep and protect our customers, and it's the 1,000th thing that we didn't learn yet that gets
Right.
it. That's usually the case, the things you didn't plan for. So we're constantly on our toes, and collegially with many competitors to learn and see what we do, and then who they use and how they help serve their customers. Because this is oftentimes deadly and serious business. You take down your doctor's office, or more important is let's say the medical flight to take the patient from here to there in emergency,
Right.
and you lose the logistics and the communications. That's the patient's life at risk, or on the table, etc. And trust me, those folks who are delivering the ransomware and making money on it, or wreaking havoc on the United States economy intentionally, that's a national security issue, and they don't care about who they're putting at risk. They don't care. What they care about is the money. They don't have to break into the bank, the physical bank, to steal. And so that makes it really difficult to continue. But it's a constant research, development, purchasing and bolting on products and services and software for all industry. And the dynamics of how the cyber crime is delivered is amazing. The numbers are startling. You go back like in 2018, 2017, I think it was like 104 million. That's a big number in itself, right? That's a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
But today you're talking multi-billions, in terms of the loss and the damages, not to mention brand damage and the pain and suffering that people go through. They put their life, blood, sweat, and tears into building their business, into being a good institution or hospital, and here they get tripped up by something that is really has little or nothing to do with what they do. They just don't care.
Exactly.
They're really skilled. And when it comes to the nation states, it's intentional. It's often
Right.
said that cybercrime from a nation state is war. You're directly affecting a company's economy, which is the livelihood of all of our fellow Americans. I mean,
Yeah, you shut down a power grid or a water supply or something. I mean, that's very direct, extreme examples, let alone just a hospital or whatever. You mentioned some Cleveland, key Cleveland tech history people like Phil Alexander at Brand Muscle, and Brad Nellis, who was president of the O's after Jim Cookingham, and of course Packy Jr. and A.J. Hyland. Anyone else jump out from the last 17 years or so that you just either admired or liked to work with or liked what they did?
yeah, I mentioned Pet Embrace and Laura Bennett and
Yeah.
her entrepreneur spirit. immigrant, and
Yeah.
built that company with her team, and sold that company, and then went on. Now she's doing some great things at Chubb's, and it's amazing. She's a real great American success story. Um, there's a lot of folks. Again, some I can't name because
Right.
they're here, but they're great mentors. They're great partners. I've learned from them through the years, personally and professionally, and about business, about not just technology, but about life, community. And I serve on boards with many of them, and they're great people. Ron Crawford comes to mind.
Oh yeah.
Ron has been a customer here with a couple different companies. I think last was Eureka Software,
Right.
and he obviously was one of the early pioneers in e-commerce per se.
Sure.
With Fathom,
Sure.
which still exists today with Scott and his company, and they're still out there delivering excellent product in advertising and e-commerce platforms. And so some of those folks, Jim Cookingham, who you mentioned, when I first came into the industry, was very, very helpful to me, and he was a resource, sort of like an encyclopedia for
Right.
remember what those were, of technology and of Cleveland, and the landscape and who you needed to know. And I remember him introducing me to what was then Nortec.
Sure.
Dorothy Bonnet
Yeah.
was another terrific person to think about and remember. In the early days of Nortec, remember in 2004, I think it was, going to an envisioning of what is 2020, and I thought, man, that's like, but what we talked about that day, or what the exercise that came from the flip chart, was the thing that sticks with me is the Eeyore complex of Cleveland.
Oh yeah.
And I understood it. I didn't have it. I've always been a cheerleader and positive about who we are and what we can do. I think we're one of the greatest mid-sized or small cities in the world. I don't think I need to try to be happy as a Clevelander, to be the biggest, largest grass city in the world. It's not who we are. But to be the best, small, mid-sized city in the world, that's within our possibility, and it exists today in a lot of ways. But the overall arching feeling was not very positive by most Clevelanders, and I would oftentimes hear people who came here from outside the region be thrilled about it and be shocked at how negative many of the people who lived here were about it. So it's not just the weather; it's a lot of things, right? But today, we envisioned in that exercise in 2020, a number of years ago, what Cleveland would look like, and a lot of those things have rung true. We've talked about it. Health services, advanced technology, software, the colleges and universities and their role in delivering in a workforce development, a ready student, the K through 12,
Right.
Curriculum and focusing on them in STEM. So a lot of those things have happened, and they continue to happen. You look at the Cleveland Municipal School District, and the Cisco Academy.
Cisco Academy.
The list goes on. Marshall, the way the IT learning there. We've seen some of those students in the workplace today. So it's happening. We're developing talent internally, and that didn't happen then. So Dorothy Bonnet, big part. And she just left Digital C, which is obviously important. We learned, particularly through the pandemic, how important connectivity is, and people who live in poverty or live in other areas that don't lend themselves to connectivity, how different technologies can bring connectivity to them in an affordable way. We were lighting up thousands of homes in Cleveland by the work of Dorothy Bonnet and her team at Digital C, which continues today. So that list could go on. I mean, you mentioned Steve Potash,
Yeah.
a guy who's impacted the world. Like, there's Park Place Technologies, who's global, and how they've done that in really a short period of time is magical. And so the list is really on and on.
We can go on forever. You and I have had these conversations before, and we'll have them in the future, because it just goes on and on, because it's really an amazing group of people who are world class in their skills and vision and entrepreneurship and all. And that, Speaking of that, BlueBridge as a company, and you in particular, have won all the awards. From when you were a rising star when you were just a kid to all the best this and the world class this and all that, for multiple years mostly. But let's talk about briefly. I've heard you say philanthropy is in Cleveland's DNA, and you're on, I think, every board there is, United Way and Northern Ohio Leukemia and Lymphoma and the Red Cross and so many more. What drives that? I mean, you've got a lot to do. You're a busy guy. You just flew in yesterday from about 6 cities, we were talking about. And what's the driving force behind all that?
So, first of all, why it's in the DNA is Cleveland for almost, probably more than a century has been noted as a philanthropic community per capita. We give more here than any place in the world per capita. We're up there in the top 5. I know in the Jewish Community Federation in Cleveland, that the Jewish community is indeed one of the top 1 or 2 cities in the country in terms of per capita giving. And that's been for a long time. It's not just something new. And many, many faiths and nationalities have the same example. And the hard work ethic, combined with immigration, combined with the satisfaction and joy of being an American, I think created an energy that exists today of giving back. For me, it's not just that history. It's really a good way of doing business. I mean, personally and professionally, you have to be vested in both. And if you're not, and it's not authentic, that's pretty transparent,
right,
and it's easy to spot. But in this city, one of the greatest ways, particularly when you're in a trusted advisor role like technology, one of the greatest ways to get the attention of business leaders is to serve them in a avocation, not your vocation, but being on boards. And understanding that when you deliver on those boards and you participate, not only do you learn different skills that you wouldn't learn at your company, but delivering is helping those institutions meet their mission. It's like in the United Way, I served on the development committee, and we went to different companies and tried to get them engaged to be part of the donor program. And that kind of work, I get to meet those folks that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And they get to see me deliver it. And then the people on the board see me deliver. And I think the thought comes, I certainly have it, if I need what he or she has that's on my board as a business, and I see how well they deliver here for free, imagine how well they would do if I paid them for it.
That's right.
And I think it's part of that, but also we get standing and credibility in the marketplace. Because in Cleveland, it's a place where you can be on the board with an SMB, a mid-market, an enterprise person. You can get to know them, they can mentor you. I mean, I watched Bill Blousy from Eaton, the CIO who recently retired, for 10 years on the right board. And I watched him, a man who had 130,000 end users, still dedicate and commit to the Regional Information Technology Engagement Board and be mindful of growing and maintaining the workforce development in IT. And so that IT could keep up, because of the talent, with the opportunities that were coming to Cleveland. And guys like Bill, you don't get to meet every day. He's busy. He's got 130,000 end users, but for 10 years, you get to sit and serve and watch and talk with,
right,
and get to know him personally and professionally. And there are many people I could go on that name that I've built relationships. I have many customers that are here because of where I've served. And Leukemia Lymphoma Society, for example, one of my coaches on the fundraiser is one of our big software companies here today. And that relationship, but for that service, I wouldn't have known him. And serving on that board and then participating in fundraiser that he led and coached, we built a relationship. So corporate social responsibility, not only standing and credibility in the marketplace, and it also, what it does is it builds a sense of efficacy. So what I do is what I do, and what I encourage my employees to do allows them to have something outside of the 4 walls of the data center to feel really good about and participate in. And I think it makes us all better human beings, so it also makes us better employees, better company. It sets a culture, a tone, a standard. You know, it's one thing to have acknowledgement. Everybody likes a pat on the back. But it's another thing where it really changes the dynamics of who you are as a team and how you deliver to the marketplace. So it's been very good, and I think, you know, as a capitalist and in a capitalistic environment, I don't believe there's anything better than an excellent product or service that you can do better for your company or yourself than is to be involved in philanthropic activities.
You know, like I said, we could go on, and one of the questions I always ask is, are you pessimistic or optimistic about Cleveland's future and all? That's, you've answered that with your way you conduct your life and in this interview, of course, too. But I do have to ask about one specific before we wrap this up. What do you see the results of, obviously for the state, but Northeast Ohio and Cleveland, with the big announcement from Intel?
So, you know, it's fascinating. That was really quiet, and then it happened. You know, Pat Genzinger, who's the CEO there, I've had an opportunity to meet at a lot of CRN events. In fact, back when he was the CEO of VMware, I got to sit and talk with him after a big keynote talk he gave. It wasn't as popular, obviously, as the Intel world today, but he was very approachable. And here he is, coming to Ohio, you know, and legislation is moving. Think about national security. Taking our reliance upon other countries and taking it back and building it here, you know, as a matter of national security. Those chips, the product they develop, we have to have access to run our world, as we've talked about. It's in everything we do. So Intel is a big investment. It will affect Cleveland in the same way the automobile industry affected Cleveland. You know, proximity. Our colleges and universities will change some curriculum, I'm sure, to educate students to be a part of that growth and a part of the ancillary growth in Cleveland. But you've got the Honda plant. That's another, I think, $4 billion. You've got, they're talking about Avon, retooling and working there in the plant. So there's like 3 or 4 big announcements in Ohio under this current administration, the DeWine administration, and Jobs Ohio, that have, you know, laid out recently and really showing the work that's going on behind the scenes. And, you know, there was a lot of disappointment, if you will, in not landing Amazon in Cleveland or Columbus. But when you think about what this is versus that, this is something with sustainability and longevity. Right. And, you know, generations and families will be fed from this work. And Cleveland will be affected by that. And all the state will be affected by that. And I think, you know, we're very blessed to have the energy and dynamics of a young mayor and his administration. You know, they have worked very hard, very fast, very smart to put some really great people in place. You know, they've got some people from industry and business, like Jeff Epstein, who was the executive director of Midtown, is now in the BIB administration, and the list there goes on. And I'm really looking forward to it. You know, I think the energy of, you know, Mayor Bibb is one of the greatest cheerleaders for the city of Cleveland. He's now on the world stage. You know, he's shaking hands with the president.
Yeah.
And this is dynamic for this city. We have a mayor who's not quiet now. We have a mayor who's leading the pack. Enthusiasm, cheerleading. You know, this morning I had breakfast at Tower City, and it was the Open to Futureland, which is essentially a movement, an event today that really wants to generate and examine and illuminate what is diversity and inclusion in technology, what exists and what's yet to come, and it's very exciting. I mean, he spoke this morning at the talk, and the enthusiasm in the crowd and the questions that were asked were all very positive, all very encouraging. They're all in, you know, and I think he does something today that is missed oftentimes in government, and it is working both sides of the aisle, if you will, bringing the aisle together. And I really find, you know, his and my politics may or may not align, it doesn't matter. What aligns is his enthusiasm, his ability, the what's happening already so fast in his administration, the modernization of his administration and technology. I know he told the crowd today that when he came, it took him hours to set up his email. It should take minutes, right?
Right.
And they've moved from what was an antiquated system to everybody's on Microsoft, 365, which is the best email system, in my opinion, in the planet. So just a little example. So he's mindful. They're very active. And that kind of activity and that kind of ability to be on the world stage, but to be, globally known, but locally focused,
Right.
and working every day hard for the community is the kind of thing that's going to affect and improve, the city of Cleveland and its ability to attract companies, to attract growth in technology, to attract M&A activity, to attract investments in companies. And we're fortunate to have North Coast Ventures and Todd Fetterman, and, or Riverside Group, and the ability, the software group at Riverside. It's just amazing, the litany of investment opportunities, and to see it come alive. I remember 17 years ago, the mindset of a lot of young entrepreneurs was that this was too conservative of a place from, getting money for help.
Phil Alexander had to go to Boston, the banks. He couldn't get funded here. Brand muscle.
And and that was the reality. That was, a lot of folks had to do that, go east or west to be heard. Where there was an environment of risk and failure was okay. And here, there was a little tighter standard, more like a banker standard, right? And maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But whatever, you couldn't get really the kind of funding that you can get today. It's remarkable. Now the East and the West are sending money here.
Right.
And that's a change in dynamics. That's a major change. And you can get, funding here today. And I think there's a lot of diversity, inclusion in the marketplace for M&A and for investment banking that I think also helps change the dynamics, because it's changed in many ways of who is at the head of the table. So I think funding is critical, and research and development is critical, and embracing entrepreneurship is another thing I heard Mayor Bibb talk about today, is really supporting entrepreneurism and teaching of entrepreneurism, in the K through 12. I think empowering that kind of mindset will also do good things for Cleveland. And
I share your optimism with the mayor. I've seen him at so many events in the community. He'll go from, looking like a neighborhood kid at the Juneteenth event in the African American Garden, because he's so young, and he showed up in his sneakers, tennis shoes, and all. And then I see him at after 7 years, Hopkins Airport finally closed that deal with Aer Lingus to have direct flights to Dublin, and he was with the ambassador to Ireland and the Irish ambassador to the U.S. Friday night at City Hall, and all. So he's got this energy. And Council President Blaine Griffin, I think he's got the same. They're on the same page, and they're driving this strategy there. And so I share your optimism there.
Another thing, Dan, I would say is that he and his administration and Council President Griffin too, they have an ability to galvanize not just both sides of the political arena, but Cleveland must be represented at the state, and it's a big issue, that we get some of our law and public policy and some of the funding that comes here, and we have to compete for that. We have to make it known, and I think we'll be well represented in that. But also the concept of Blaine Griffin, Council President Griffin, and Mayor Bibb being able to galvanize the business community to get behind them, whether they're Republican, conservative, progressive, liberal Democrats. I don't think it really matters. I've been with all of them and at meetings and events, and they seem to generate a very positive feedback from all those different groups and engagement from all those different groups, and to some sense buy-in. So yes, a major optimism from administration and government, local government, and what can happen as a result of that.
All right. Well, we can go on forever, and we will, Kevin. We'll be talking, but not online. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of this in a couple of months. But today, is Cleveland Tech history. We're talking with a really good man. Your name fits, Kevin Goodman. with BlueBridge Networks. As always, visitors, viewers, let us know what you think, who else you'd like to see, and Kevin will keep talking to you. Good to see
Thanks.
you today.
Enjoyed the dialogue. Thank
If
you.
you're ever looking for BlueBridge, if you can't find it, it's pretty easy. Just come down here to Playhouse Square. Okay, and here we are in Euclid. And just look a little to the west here, and there's BlueBridge in the Sterling building. Right in the heart of Playhouse Square.